Welcome back to another powerful episode of the Rise Up For You podcast. Today, we are diving deep into the mindset, resilience, and unstoppable drive it takes to build success, break through barriers, and truly rise up for your full potential. And I could not have a better guest for this conversation. He's the one and only Mike C-Roc. You might have heard his name. He's a powerhouse entrepreneur, best-selling author, speaker, and he's actually the driving force behind That One agency and That One podcast. But more than that, Mike is on a mission to help people turn adversity into fuel. He's the definition of someone who refuses to let circumstances define him. Instead, he creates his own momentum and helps others do the same. So in this podcast, we're talking about what it really means to build resilience, the power of unwavering confidence, and how to stop waiting for permission and start taking massive action in your business and life. So if you're ready to unleash your potential, break past limiting beliefs, this is one episode you do not want to miss. Buckle up. Let's get started. All right, C-Roc, welcome to the Rise Up For You podcast. It's such an honor to have you on our show today.
What's up, Nada? Great to see you again. We got to hang out in Vegas, and it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to meet you and hang out with you and some others amazing people. And congratulations on your book.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. So yes, everyone that's listening, C-Roc and I are, I would say, new friends, right? The last couple months we met at a conference here in Vegas and we hit it off. I think we actually even recorded like a podcast live that night or something, right? A bunch of us just went to the studio randomly and we just started talking. So
some people party in Vegas. We podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation, but just for our audience, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we'll take it from there.
I'm just a guy with a servant heart. I love people. I love serving. I wake up every morning obsessed with helping people. I've been fortunate enough to be through some amazing, difficult times in my life, from a child through entrepreneurship and millions of dollars and, stress at the time, which when you go through tough times, you don't realize that it's building you. And now I do.
Yeah.
Back then I didn't. And I just love helping people with everything that I've learned and how I'm built now, so.
Yeah. So take us back a little bit. So tell us who C-Roc was in high school. What were you like?
I was a kid that had great grades, very social and athletic. I played football, wrestled, and played baseball. Never drank or partied. I went to parties, but I didn't drink or anything. I was, really keen on, keeping myself straight and narrow and on a straight and narrow. And I just, that was it. And I had aspirations, and I wanted to be a football player, and I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. So that's high school.
So tell me, because I spent a lot of time in education before I built the company. And I was very similar to you. I was a cheerleader, and I was like constantly involved in activities. I would always go to the cheerleader and football parties, but I never drank. I never did drugs, nothing of that sort. But most young adults, I wouldn't say had that experience. Typically, they fall under peer pressure. So I'm curious a little bit more about your background, like with your parents and your household. Like, how were you able to be a young teenager and kind of stay on that straight path?
Well, it's kind of funny because I did when I was a teenager, but when I turned 18, graduated, I went down a different path, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
I came from a lot of brokenness, a lot of, I don't remember my parents together. A lot of conflict, chaos, confusion, being around, child support battles, custody battles, step parents coming into the mix, them having kids with a new family and how that all came, interacted.
Yeah.
And then also a lot of my family was on prescription medication for anxiety, depression, alcoholics. As I got older, experienced family members losing them to suicide. So that's kind of the environment that I grew up in.
Yeah.
But Nada, I just want to make sure that everybody understands, like, when I share that, I look at that now as, an amazing opportunity to be built into someone that's unstoppable, that loves people, that wants to help people, that has seen all the ways to do it wrong. Yeah. And I had that advantage over a lot of people. I saw all the ways to do it wrong. So all I had to do was the opposite. So when I share that with you, I'm not by any means playing a victim or woe is me. I'm so grateful for those opportunities and those experiences that I've been through. So I just want to add that part.
So I want to tap into that a little bit more, because that's what I would call resilience that moves forward. And so, for those of you that are listening, I kind of define resilience in two different ways. Resilience is like you get back up, right? And like you've survived the circumstance, you're strong enough to survive the circumstance. But most people are just that. They're resilient, but their situation always impacts them for the rest of their life. So even though they survived it and they got back up with strength, there's a piece of them in the back of their head where it holds them back. So they kind of use that story for the rest of their life, and it keeps them stuck. And then I see resilience that's moving forward, which is, I would say, your case, where you survived, you got back up, you're strong, but then you use the pain as fuel for growth in a positive way. Like it pushes you and it drives you forward. So I'm curious for you, how did you get to that point versus being the person that's like, woe is me, I survived it, but I'm stuck in it?
Yeah, well, I had to go through a period of time figuring that out. First, I wanted to run from it when I got older. When I went to college, I was free, on my own. And I started looking for, by the way, first of all, I went to college and I came from a small town, and I didn't never see the variety of women, girls at the time, I guess, women. I never saw the variety of parties, how you could establish yourself and create status around going to parties and being the life of the party.
Yeah.
All the wrong things. And I went through that and had to figure my way out. And the thing about that is it's very gratifying immediately, right? But long term, it leads you down a dark path. And I got to a place after all my friends started leaving college where I was left with people that were just like me at the time, which was looking for the next party. Couldn't sit at home at night. I hated sitting at home after work, going to my house and just sitting there by myself. I hated it. I couldn't be by myself. And I think that has to do with, at the time, not being really friendly with myself and taking care of myself and loving myself.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be by myself. I wanted to be around people. I wanted connection. I wanted affection. And so, but it goes to a dark place because eventually all my friends started going on their lives, going back home, getting jobs. And here I was left with a crowd that I really didn't want to be in. And I was probably bad for that crowd as well. It wasn't just the people that were bad for me. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, so that I had to go through that time to really find myself, and then start to find what works, and what matters is what the longevity, what feels good in the long term, what makes you happier and gives you joy in the long term. And so, yeah, I had to go through that, and then eventually got into the business world and started figuring things out in the business world, going through trials and errors and polishing, so to speak, and learning, and then just stacking from there. Like, okay, what's next? Once I figured something out, share it with people, help people, and then what's next? How far can I take this thing?
Yeah. How did you get into the business side of things? Was there a mentor, somebody that you met? Was there somebody that had influence, or did you just have an awakening one day and figure out you want to do something different with your life, and you kind of fell onto business?
Yeah, I think growing up, we were always taught to get a good job, and obviously we hear this a lot out there in social media and personal development world. You're get a good job, make a good salary, get benefits, and then retire one day. And I never really had an aspiration to be wealthy. I just didn't. I don't know why. And then I started in a sales job. I was in the restaurant business first, and I realized that wasn't a good place to be if you like to party.
Yeah.
and then I got into the sales. A mentor of mine was my customer all the time at this Italian restaurant I worked in. And he said, "Hey, you know what? You'd be really good at what we do. You should stop by my office." I said, "All right. I guess I was looking for something else." And it ended up being an in-home sales job where I would drive all over the place and go into homes and sell a product. And I did that for 9 years. And I learned a lot from that mentor. I ended up hating that after a while, just hating. I knew I wasn't. When you're not destined for something, you're not supposed to be in that position for a long time.
Yeah.
You get these emotional feelings. You can feel it.
Sure.
There's physiological reactions that happen. I just knew I wasn't, but I stayed there, and I wasn't like courageous enough at the time to make a move. I thought, man, what else can I do? I dropped out of college. What else can I do? And I think we all go through that period of time. And over my life, I've gotten that time to be shrunk smaller and smaller and smaller, to where I was able to realize something needed to change and make a change and confront it.
Yeah.
And I was in sales for 9 years. Then I got into real estate, and then got into mortgages. And then I started thinking, wait, I can build this. I started building a company around lending. Mm-hmm. To the point where I had a company that was from Delaware to Miami. We had hundreds of employees. I did that for 20 some years. made millions, been a part of lending probably $4 to $5 billion. And again, realized it came to a point again where I was like, this is not what life's supposed to be for me.
Yeah.
And I had to make another change. So yeah, so that's how I got into the business world.
Yeah. It's interesting because as you were talking, I was reminded of like when I had the epiphany of that you can work for yourself and feel fulfilled, and in some cases do better. I remember when I was working a job, like just a typical job. And then I used to be a performer, C-Roc. I don't know if you knew that. And one day somebody said to me, "Hey, can I take voice lessons with you? And I'll just pay you privately." And I said, "I don't know. Sure." And I went online and I was like, okay, like what's the average rate, to take a voice lesson? It was like $80 at the time. And I was getting paid like $10 an hour. So that was my first epiphany of realizing, wait a minute, I'm getting $80 to teach someone voice in the comfort of my own home with my piano. And then I'm like slaving away, making $10 an hour for someone else.
Yeah.
And there was just this epiphany of like, okay, there's possibility here. So
yeah.
as you were talking, I kind of was hearing that. The other thing that I heard that I think is pretty fascinating is that you're not afraid to change. It sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, C-Roc, because we talk about this a lot when it comes to self-confidence, is like trusting your intuition. It's like you have that feeling, it doesn't feel right. And it sounds like you weren't afraid to pivot when you had that feeling. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, this started when I was younger. I lived with my mom until I was 8 years old, and she was about to move on to her third marriage. A guy named George. He was really set in his ways. He was a hunter and fisherman. But I didn't want to move into another man's house, and it was in the sticks too. And I said, you know what? I want to move in with my dad. He was moving on to a second marriage. He was well off with money, and this would be cool if I left here and went into this environment. And so at a young age, I started doing that kind of stuff. I told my mom I wanted to move. She let me against her best wishes. And not every move, and when you're courageous and make a move, and not everyone works out the way you think it would.
Sure.
And I ended up going through a lot of abuse. Seeing things I shouldn't have seen, and for 3 years of my life being in a very hostile environment. But again, it shaped me, I mean, it really created opportunities for me to see what not to do in life. And I became a fan of studying human behavior.
Yeah.
I started watching the people that were having issues in my life and trying to figure out, like, why are they like this? What's really behind this? And understanding that it's not me. When they go off on you or they treat you a certain way, it's not about me. It's really about them.
Yeah.
Right. And then I had to navigate how to be in a situation with someone that was antisocial personality or toxic. How to navigate that to protect myself.
Yeah.
How to say what needs to be said or do what needs to be done to make sure that I stay out of the way.
Yeah.
And navigate that.
What you said is really important. And if you're listening, I really want you to take this in, because you said something that's very wise that you learned at a young age, is that a lot of times the things that you are receiving from other people, the pain and the hurt, it's not about you. It's their hurt, it's their pain, it's their projection that gets thrown onto you. And a lot of times as individuals, we take it on as if it has to do with us, and we can't tell the difference, right?
Yeah.
And then we grow up and we have like all of these limiting beliefs and all of this pain and all of these thoughts that are hurtful about ourselves that really have nothing to do with us at all. It was somebody else that was in pain that kind of threw it at us, and we just accepted it.
Yeah. I mean, I was called, this word sticks out to me. I never knew what the word meant, but the way it was said to me, with the emotion it was said to me, really, I knew something wasn't right about it, but it was the word pathetic. You're pathetic. Imagine an 8 to 10-year-old kid, right? Yeah. And an adult calling them pathetic. Like, what does it matter with people? So anyway, I had that word and it stuck with me for years. And of course, I think that we all, until we refine our engine, refine our beingness, we use whatever we can for fuel.
Yeah.
Right. I think that, and it's a toxic type fuel. It's a low octane fuel that we have to use. But I used that. I used my dad when I decided to leave that house. He got served with papers because I shared, with my mom what was going on, and she filed papers behind the scenes, and I had to sit in the house waiting for these papers to be delivered. And when he eventually got those papers delivered, he said, my dad was an amazing businessman. He had a masonry business, and he's Italian. He used to carry $100 bills in his pocket all the time. I loved, by the way, I loved that the $100 bill back when I was a kid. I just remember my dad flashing that all the time. And He was really good with money, but actually tight with money, but really good at building. And he came back and confronted me about this court papers that were delivered and served to him. And he said, "It says here you want to move back in with your mom. What's the deal here? Your mom doesn't have anything. She's in and out, men coming in and out of the house, and she's living paycheck to paycheck. You want to go to that when you have what we have here?" And he was obviously blinded to the toxicity and the toxic environment. And I said, "Yeah, I don't want to discuss it. I made my decision up." And I'm 10 years old at the time. And he said, "Okay." So that wad of $100 bills that he always carried around with him, I used to look up to him for that. He pulled it out, peeled one off, and crumpled it up, and he threw it at me. He said, "Here, you're going to need this when you're living on the streets with your mother one day." And at the moment, I was like, what did I just do? Oh, no. Like, I felt like I started World War III. And then I started really quickly realize, wait a minute, I'm not going to need that money. I'll show him. And that's the type of fuel that I used. I grabbed that kind of thing. I grabbed all the toxins. I grabbed it and used it as fuel to get to a certain point in my life. 30-some years, I used that. Then I started assessing myself when I got into my 30s, late 30s, 40. I started like realizing, like, man, I'm better than I'm giving myself credit for. I have the ability to do amazing things. I got to build. So I started being around mentors and studying. And when I bettered myself to a certain point, my beingness got bigger and more able and capable. And when I did that, I was like, this fuel's not working anymore. It doesn't feel right to use this toxic fuel. I need a higher octane fuel. And then I grew in my spirituality and started to realize that my relationship with God is really what the fuel that I was searching for, that really can take you to levels you can't even imagine. And I filled a gap, and with that higher octane fuel, because you can use that toxic fuel for so long, but eventually it's not good for you anymore. It doesn't let the engine keep going at that new refined stage.
Absolutely. I know we talked about this slightly about resilience earlier, but I'm always so fascinated by how one person can go through like a traumatic or a hard situation and rise through it, and then another one doesn't. And like when I think about kids, there's so many kids that are in these situations where they get put down and then they stay small the rest of their life. You were so young, you were 10, high school, that kind of thing. What do you think, like what contributed to you as a young child saying, no, that's not going to happen? Like, was there anything that contributed to that? Was it just something you think you were born with? Was it innate? How do you think you kind of...
Well, a couple things. My mom, I remember her telling me when I was younger, she would always say, she showed me a lot of love, but she always used to say, "You're right. You're right again. You're right." And I would always hear that from her. Instead of arguing with me, she would say, "You're right. You're right. You're right." And I just remember that must have been ingrained in me. And then she always told me I'm a leader. You're a leader. And so she put these little programming messages in me when I was younger. Yeah. But I do believe that we are predispositioned to an extent to have a spirit that is just hungry for growth, hungry to do something amazing. And I think others don't have that, and they got to work more at it. It's not to say that they can't do it. So predispositioning for sure, programming for sure. And then those that come into this world sometimes, look, I'm a spiritual being. I have this body here on earth to operate with, but I believe that we come into this world, we select a body, a family to go into, and we don't remember that.
Yeah.
And when we get here, then some people are just like, yeah, I've had enough.
Yeah.
I've had enough. And then others are just not, they haven't had enough. They're hungry for more.
Yeah.
And then some people leave the planet. I've witnessed a lot, not witnessed, but I've been around, had family members that ended their life early.
Yeah.
And my understanding of it is that they came and then they just were ready to go, like move on from this planet, this body, whatever. They just decide that that's it. And we look at it from our perspectives as human beings as, wow, how could they do that? Like they left us here. They're so selfish and this and that. But I think that if you're a spiritual person, you got to be thinking beyond just the human experience. And I think that sometimes when we have this understanding, I just know. I can't explain it more than I just know there's more than just this experience here. And when you understand that and you start going deeper in that area, you got to expand your mind and understanding of the fact that this isn't all there is.
Yeah.
So if somebody leaves, there's something more to it. You know? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I understand what you mean about like, it's hard to explain because God, the all being is beyond the human mind, right? A lot of times we try to explain things, but it's beyond even our mental capacity, right? It's so much bigger than like the human brain. So I get that, what you say. So today you run That One podcast. You're an entrepreneur. You've been able to grow yourself and your success. Tell the audience like a little bit about what you're doing, because I know you're working with a lot of thought leaders, executives, like people that are running businesses. Tell us a little bit more about like that process and that journey, why you do it.
Well, when I hit 40, I was in the mortgage business and we were doing very well financially. I'd come home miserable for some reason. And I was so conflicted. I'm like, why am I feeling this way? I have everything all that I thought that we're supposed to have, like a family, beautiful wife, married 22 years, healthy kids, house on the water, nice car, all the stuff. People work for me. I get to decide when I want, like what my schedule is. Like all this stuff was great. I come home, just something wasn't sitting right. And I started to do some self-assessment. I started to realize, like, wait a minute, I'm destined for bigger things. Like, this is just not it for me. And again, I was in a situation where I had to confront something. Now, the money was so good. I didn't want to just leave what I was doing because I have a lifestyle that we're used to. My family expects a certain lifestyle. And I was like, all this stuff was going around in my head and there was a lot of fear. And that trapped feeling, though, was more powerful than the fear. I felt trapped, and I don't like to feel trapped. And I don't want to be a puppet. I don't want to be controlled by something or someone. And so I just was to a situation where I started to work on myself and assess what was going on. And I realized, wait a minute, I just need to confront something. The longer you wait to confront something, most people are unwilling to confront issues, things they know they need to confront. And the longer you wait, the more pressure builds up. And then eventually we're all forced to confront whatever there is that's needed to confront. So I started confronting. I said, you know what? I'm not doing this the rest of my life. I made a decision. Decisions change everything. It's a commitment. I just decided this is not the way I want to live the rest of my life. But what am I going to do next? Mm-hmm. And so I started watching people that were mentors of mine, and I watched how they were manufacturing their celebrity. They were creating a buzz around themselves, their brand, their business, to create an attraction model. I call it an attraction model. It's, otherwise you're in a chase mode. I was in chase mode my whole life, whether it was women, parties, revenue, friends, whatever.
Yeah.
And I just was tired of doing that. And I wanted to create an attraction model. So when watching these guys manufacture celebrity, I said, I got to get behind the scenes. There's something I don't know. There's something going on here. If I could just learn it, I'll be able to do it because I have the stories, I have the experience, I have the success. I just need attention. And I got to create an attraction. So I committed to getting known globally. Now, I had no idea how to do that. But when you commit, you figure it out. It just happens. Your attention gets directed. When your attention gets direction, the distractions and the programming of all these other sources, whether it's media or politicians or whatever, they get pushed away. You get a shield around you, and your attention gets focused on what it's going to take to validate the commitment. And that's how you create your world that you live in. Most people's worlds are created by their attention being directed by other people. And then they live in resentment and unfulfillment and depression and anxiety. And so I just committed. And when I did this, got behind the scenes, I started seeing how people are manufacturing their celebrity. All celebrity is manufactured. Anybody listening right now, if you have something to write down or take a note in your phone, please understand that everything you see out there is all manufactured. It's all created. Mm-hmm. There's smoke and mirrors. There's different hacks that people do.
Yes.
It's all designed to get perception to look bigger than it actually is.
Yeah.
Better than it actually is. Most people meet their heroes or celebrities and they're disappointed. And if you do this manufacturing celebrity and you don't back it up and you're not authentic, you'll be found out eventually. It won't last long. But I realized this. So I said, okay, well, how do I manufacture celebrity? So one of my mentors said to me, dude, you got to get on podcasts. And I said, okay, which ones? He said, all of them. And that was Grant Cardone, by the way. He said, all of them. I said, okay, I take things literally. I'm very coachable. So I said, all right, great. So I started going on podcasts 7 to 10 a week as a guest. Okay, 7 to 10 a week, 5 years straight, over 1,100 episodes as a guest. Now, when I first started, I would go on shows nobody's ever heard of before. I'd be the first guest. I'd go on any kind of podcast. I'd go on women's podcasts. They were talking about perimenopause, menopause. I didn't even know what that was. I didn't do anything. I just put reps in. I was just pounding. And before you know it, and everybody around me, by the way, they were like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? You're doing a podcast? Like, what? Who are you to be on somebody's podcast? I'd hear all this stuff. And I would just store it in my tank, use it as fuel. Most people store it in their trunk and they said, stop.
Yeah. Or it weighs them down. Yeah, totally.
I didn't stop. I just kept going. Then I said, I'm going to write a book. So I wrote a book called Rocket Fuel, Convert Setbacks, Become Unstoppable. And I talk about in here how you need to store everything. We have a choice. Store it in tank, store it in a trunk. If you store it in your trunk, it's going to stop you and slow you down. If that's what you want, great, store it in your trunk. Most people do that. I stored everything in my tank, and I used it when I needed it for fuel, and it kept elevating me. And so the podcast game changed my life. I started my own show back then too, over 1,000 episodes of the What Are You Made Of show. And eventually I was hearing this thing over and over again. We all heard, your network is your net worth. Your network is your net worth. Your network is your net worth.
Yep, absolutely.
And I started thinking to myself, I have billionaires, I have celebrities, politicians, movie producers, actors, athletes, top business people in my network. They know who I am. They like me, but I don't know what to do with it. What do I do? How can that be my net worth? And then I was in prayer one day, and I realized in that prayer, God said, it's not about you, dude. By the way, like God talks to me like the way I talk, you know. It's not about you, dude. It's not about you. It's about other people. I didn't put you in this position and build this network for you. I did it for other people, for you to be a catalyst. And I was like, oh, and it was like the biggest realization. I felt this energy come off of me. I felt lighter. I felt just like amazing. And I was like, oh, I got it. I created a brand called That One. And we now are a connection networking company that uses the vehicle of podcast guesting to connect people and be the catalyst for amazing connections and collaborations and help people with their missions. And one other thing that I'll tell you, a lot of us entrepreneurs have this shiny bells and whistles syndrome. It's like, oh, that looks like a good idea. Let me run here. Then you see this over here, and then you run over here, and then you're so dispersed, you're not successful in anything. Mm-hmm. And this helped me quench this thirst of the shiny bells and whistles syndrome, because now I can do my thing at That One agency, build, but help other people with their missions. And there's people like real estate people, entrepreneurs, biohackers, longevity, real estate investors, all tech, all these different things. Now I'm involved with all these things, but my focus is not dispersed. It's laser focused. And now it's like the perfect combination.
Yeah, I love that. Well, congratulations. And thank you for sharing your story, especially the shiny object syndrome, because so many people, when they do start, that's the challenge, right? They never get off the ground because they keep pivoting before they like test a model, before they see what really works. Yeah. C-Roc, I would love to go into the power section of the interview. So I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. So my first question for you is, if you could leave the world with one final message, we call it our golden nugget, what would that be for you?
Serve others. Yeah. Serve others. Now, by the way, when I say serve others, I'm not saying you don't serve yourself.
Yeah.
You just don't look for others to serve you. Mm-hmm. You have to serve. When I say serve yourself first, and then that's going to allow you to serve way better and way more people. So just serve, give. Yeah.
And new question here is, what makes you cry on demand? Like, what's something that just like you see it or you feel it and you just start bawling? Anything?
Yeah, well, a couple things. One is when I see somebody that's worked so hard to accomplish something, and especially sports, when I'm watching sports and I see a team win a championship or a golfer win a championship or something that's just like they've put so much time and effort in to be great, and they finally get to that moment where they win, and it's just like, yeah, I get chills and tear up for that. And then see their parents like come out and the interaction they have with them and how proud the parents are. And that gets me. And then the other thing that gets me, and this is, I don't share this with too many people, but Love is Blind is a show that's been on Netflix for a while. There's a bunch of seasons that
I watch it all the time. Yep.
Yeah. I don't know what it is, man, but there's something about that show. My wife and I watch it together, and it just reminds you of the dating times, and it reminds you of what matters in a relationship, and how sometimes that fizzles out, that first part fizzles out, and you don't ever want that to happen.
Yeah.
And so if you understand that can fizzle out, that energy, that emotion, when you become aware of it, you can do something about it.
Yeah.
And you can be intentional. And when you're intentional about it, you can start doing things to work on it to make it better every day. Yeah. And that's my intention, is for my relationship, 22 some years now. I want it to get better every day. I want everything I do. And this is not just relationships. It's like health, finances, relationships. I want everything. I want to be in the best shape of my life every day that goes by.
Yeah.
You know, and so same thing with the relationship. So that show gets me sometimes when we're watching it.
Yeah, I love that. I have one more question for you, C-Roc, but before I ask, tell the audience where they can find you, social media. I know you have a podcast. Brag a little bit about where we can get to know you.
Yeah, That One Agency is the company. It's the number one agency.com. Or you can go ahead and check out the podcast, That One Podcast with Mike, C-Roc, and Kins. We're out traveling the country. It's a tour.
Great.
You can see that on your favorite podcast platform. Motivation Success Network. It's a television show as well.
Great.
But Mikey C-Roc on Instagram. That's my favorite platform. I DM all the time. Okay. Mikey C-Roc.
Awesome. I love that. Final question for you, C-Roc. As you know, we're the company Rise Up For You. What comes to mind for you when you hear that phrase?
Rise up for you. Goes back to the service thing I just talked about. Like, rise up for you. Why? I mean, it goes back to understanding, serve yourself first, take care of yourself, find out areas you're weak in, where your gaps are, and start working on yourself, and just be determined to be the best version of yourself. See how far you can take this thing. And you're going to notice that you're going to be able to help so many more people, which is going to elevate you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. Love talking to you. And thank you, everyone, for joining the Rise Up For You podcast. Every single week, we are bringing you brand new episodes. We're speaking with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, executives from around the world. And our goal is to help you be your absolute best. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you next time. Thank you again, C-Roc.
Thank you.
Hey, welcome to the Rise Up For You podcast. This is your host, Nada Lena Nasserdeen, also the CEO and founder of Rise Up For You. I want to remind you just a little bit about what we do. My team and I are working with organizations, leaders, and entrepreneurs around the world to enhance company culture, performance, potential, all through soft skills. So if you're anything like me and you love to push your potential, you want to be high performing on a day-to-day basis and truly have it all as an individual and as a business, check us out and make sure that you sign up for your free informative call. We have an amazing team of trainers and coaches that are here to serve you. And let's be real, it's hard to do things by yourself. We all have blind spots, including myself. And sometimes it's just that much easier when you have a coach, when you have a mentor that's by your side, cheering you on and helping you and your team get to the next level. Okay, my friends, don't forget to sign up for that call, whether you're a leader in the workplace or an individual looking to grow yourself. We're here to serve you.